For this lesson, we'll be working with a spreadsheet that's accessible via the website. You can click on the link under the Video Resources tab, and you'll find this Excel spreadsheet accessible. Now you can open this spreadsheet up also in Google Sheets if you like, but it was designed for Microsoft Excel and it works best in Microsoft Excel. So as you can see from the spreadsheet, I've provided some fractions here on the left-hand side in column D, and I've also provided some percentages here in column H. And I've also included some decimals in column F. And our objective here today is to convert these fractions into decimals and percentages, or to work backwards from percentages into decimals and then into fractions. If we start out with a decimal, we should be able to create both a fraction from it as well as a percentage from it. Now it's important to keep in mind that fractions, decimals, and percentages are all essentially the same thing in terms of valuation. Think of it as, saying bonjour in French, or buenos dias in Spanish, or hello in English. They mean the same thing, but they're said in three different ways and in three different languages. Along the same lines, fractions are essentially the same thing as decimals and percentages in terms of valuation. They're just spoken differently, or they're formatted differently. But they all mean the same thing. The key thing is to be able to memorize some of these key fractions. I designed this spreadsheet so that students can get a good feel for some of the more popular or more often used fractions, decimals, and percentages. How often have you walked down the street and seen, 33% off or 50% off? We're pretty familiar with those percentages, but we should be able to convert those percentages back into decimals and fractions. On the right-hand side of this table, from columns L through S, I've provided some helpful hints in converting fractions to decimals, decimals to percentages, percentages to decimals, and finally, converting decimals to fractions. We will refer to some of these tips along the way. And as you see here in column J, I'm asking students to create a diagram or a pie chart representation of the fraction, decimal, or percentage to the left-hand side. We'll do a few of these together. Okay, so we'll start with column D with the fractions here on the left-hand side, and we'll be converting first to a decimal and then into a percentage. According to our helpful hints on the right-hand side, when we convert a fraction to a decimal, we're simply dividing the numerator by the denominator, A over B. So whenever you see a fraction and you've got a number on the top, that's the numerator, represented in this case by letter A, whatever A is, divided by the denominator, B. A over B is the same thing as dividing A by B. Let's say we didn't know that 1 over 2 was equal to 0.5. Most of us seem to be pretty familiar with the fraction 1/2. And we've seen it as represented by 0.5 as a decimal and as 50%. But let's assume that you didn't know that and that you were faced with a complicated fraction of some sort. So if you take your handy calculator and key in 1 divided by 2 equals, you get 0.5. Now we happen to have an Excel spreadsheet in front of us here, so why not use it as well? All formulas in Excel start with the equal sign. So equals the number 1, / for division. In Excel, all division is represented by a / symbol, divided by, in this case, the number 2. When you hit enter, you get 0.5. Now this happens to be a pre-formatted spreadsheet that I designed specifically for this class. But let's say this was not the correct format. Let's say, for example, you happen to have a date here, for example, and that's obviously the wrong format of the answer. Well, we could go up to the formatting pull-down menu here and just make sure that you select number, because we're working with decimals in this case. You can adjust the number of decimals by clicking on the left one to increase the number of digits to the right of the decimal point, or decreasing the number of digits by clicking on the one with the small blue arrow pointing to the right. that will decrease the number of digits. Again, clicking on the left blue arrow increases the number of digits. Clicking on the right blue arrow reduces the number of digits. In this case, let's keep our digits to the hundredths place, which is 2 to the right of the decimal point. Let's try another example together, shall we? Let's convert 1/3, 1/3, into a decimal. Again, we could use our handy dandy handheld calculator and just type in 1 divided by 3 equals, and you'll see that it's equal to 0.33333333 repeating. So in decimal format, you have a never-ending continuous decimal. We can use 3 digits in this case because we want to show that this number is repeating. In Excel, once again, we would use the equal sign to start our calculation. Equals, we'll key in the number 1, / divided by the number 3, hit enter, and we get 0.33. Again, if we'd like to increase the number of digits to the right of the decimal point, we click on this blue arrow to the left, and we increase the number of digits. Let's go out to 3 digits in this case. Let's do another one together. Let's convert the fraction 1/4, or 1/4, into a decimal. So using our calculator, we can just divide 1 by 4. 1 divided by 4, and we get 0.25. In Excel, we could just type in equals 1 / 4 and hit enter. And we get our answer. Now notice in Excel, if you want to double check whether you have a number that you typed in versus an actual formula that's being calculated for you, you can double click on the cell itself. By double clicking on the cell, we see that this indeed is a formula that's being calculated for us. As opposed to, let's say I typed in the number 0.25, I could just type that in, and it'll show us the decimal 0.25. But is this really a formula at work? Well, if we double click on it, you'll see that the cell is flashing simply a number. It's not flashing an Excel formula. So to undo what we just did, we want to take us back to the formula that we just keyed in. We would just click on this undo button here, this curve to the left back arrow. If you click on this, okay, this takes us back to the formula that we keyed in. All right, equals 1 divided by 4. Now you'll also notice that in Excel, this white zone here where it says FX, that's the formula bar. And that tells you what formula is input in any cell that you hover over. So as you can see, on the left-hand side here, we have the number 0.5 or 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5. These are all integers or decimals that have been keyed into the computer already, as opposed to these here, which are all formulas. This is an alternative to double-clicking on the cell itself. Okay? Formula, formula. Double-click on the cell, formula, and it's also represented in the formula bar here, just below the main menu. All right, so why don't you take a moment and use your Excel knowledge or your calculator to convert these remaining fractions into decimals. I'll wait while you do that. Okay, so 1/5 would simply be equals 1 divided by 5, 1/4/5, and we get 0.2. 1/8 would be equals 1 divided by 8, which is actually that's 0.125. So we'll extend the digits out another place to the right, which will take us to the thousandths. That's actually 125 thousandths. In the case of 3/8, we have 3 divided by 8, so that simply equals 3 divided by 8. And finally, we have 3/4, which is equals 3/4. You've probably recognized that one as well. Okay, now let's convert the decimals to percentages. The easiest way to convert a decimal into a percentage is by moving the decimal place 2 spaces to the right and then tacking on the percentage sign. So in the case of 0.50, we just slide the decimal point 1 to the right, 2 to the right, and tack on the percentage sign. That gives us 50%. But Excel is pretty smart about things. All we have to do in Excel to create the percentage from the decimal is simply to tell Excel to refer to the cell to the left here, in this case 0.5, which happens to be cell F8. And you can see that it's being referenced here in the formula bar, equals F8, the cell F8. And if we key it in, it keys in a decimal format, which we don't want. So to format it as a percentage, all we have to do is head on up here to the number formatting pull-down menu, and we can choose various formats for our number. We head on down to where it says percentage, click on this, and it automatically creates a percentage for us. And now that we have an automatically formatted percentage in Excel, we can adjust the number of digits to the right of the decimal point by clicking once again on the blue arrows at the top here, which are located just beneath the pull-down menu for number formatting. Okay? Remember, clicking on the arrow to the left increases the number of digits to the right of the decimal point. In this case, it's a percentage, and clicking to the right reduces the number of digits to the right of the decimal point. Now, the wonderful thing about Excel is that once you've done this work of referencing a particular cell and say, take this cell to the left here in column F and create a percentage version of this valuation, once you've done that, as we've done already, we can just copy this cell down all the way down the spreadsheet like this. And automatically Excel is it's doing a relative cell reference referring to the values in column F. And as you can see, if I click on any of these cells, it's saying, okay, look 2 cells to the left, go to column F, take that value that's in that column, and then format it as a percentage. How easy is that? But just in case, if you've forgotten how to key in the formula, let's do it together. In the case of 1/8 or 0.125, let's create a percentage by creating a cell formula by going equals and then highlighting the cell that you want to reference. In this case, it's F16. And I can use my mouse to highlight the cells that I want to reference, or I could use the keyboard. It does not matter. Keyboard or mouse does not matter. In this case, let's reference cell F16, hit enter, and lo and behold, we have another decimal. Well, this is not formatted properly, so we can either go upstairs and copy the formatting from upstairs, right-click copy, right-click paste special, and then we say, just copy the format for me. And it does that for us. We could have also, if I click undo, we could have also simply headed on up to the number formatting pull-down menu, headed down to where it says percentage, clicked on that, and Excel would then create a percentage for us. Okay, so while we have this, let's just simply right-click copy and right-click paste. Now, as a tip, there are various ways to copy and paste in Excel. As I showed you just a moment ago, you can simply right-click on the cell, click copy, head on over to your target cell, right-click paste, and voila, you have the formula as well as the formatting exactly copied down to your target destination cell. Another way to copy paste in Excel is something that I'm sure you're familiar with in other programs. It's Control-C and Control-V. That's the keyboard method. So in this case, I could highlight my reference cell, 37.5%. I'm going to hit Control-C, or on a Mac, it's Command-C. And then head on over to my target destination cell by clicking with my mouse inside it, and then Control-V or Command-V on a Mac. And there you go. That's easy enough. Now in column J, where it says diagram, I'd like you to create a pie chart representation of the percentages or the fractions or the decimals that you have to the left. Let's picture a pie of pizza, for example. You have your pizza pie in front of you, and you slice it in half, 2 parts. 2 is the denominator in this case. We have 2 slices of a pie. Well, how many slices are you going to eat? Well, I'm going to eat 1 of 2. So I'm going to eat 1 of 2 slices of this equally sliced pie of pizza. And so I've eaten 1/2 or 50% of the pizza pie. So if you take a moment to draw a diagram of 1/2 of the pizza pie, then it should look something like this, where you've simply drawn a circle for the pie and then you've shaded 1 of 2 pieces. Okay? Let's do another one together. In the case of 3/4 or 3/4, we've sliced the pizza pie into 4 equal parts, and the number 4 in the denominator, 3/4, A over B, remember the B represents the number of slices of the pie. We have 4 equal sized slices, hence the number in the denominator. Now we happen to be eating 3 of the equally sliced 4 slices of the pizza pie, and so we shade in 3 of those 4 slices. But what if we're dealing with a compound fraction, or multiple pies? Let's take 2.5 as an example. Let's create a fraction first, a percentage second, and then let's do the diagram together. Okay, we all know that 2.5 simply means 2.5. So if we head on over to the fraction column, we could simply use Excel's great formatting capability and reference the decimal to the right. So we'll go equals, in this case, from column F, row 34, F34. And then we're just going to head on up here to the pull-down menu for number formatting and go to where it says fraction. And there you have it. Excel will automatically format the fraction for us. Equals 2.5. We can copy this upstairs as well, like so. In the case of 1.0, there is no fractional part, so it's just the number 1 unit. But getting back to 2.5, we have our fraction. We know how to format our decimal into the fraction format by using Excel's pull-down menu here for formatting. And now let's convert this to a percentage by just using the pull-down menu. And we notice that 2.5 is actually 250%. But how do we write 2.5? Well, we're going to have to think outside the box. Or, in this case, think outside the pie. Sorry for that. So what we're dealing with in this case is 2 whole pies plus 1/2 of a pie. And so we have 2 full pies, 1/1 plus 1/1, and then we have to draw in the remaining half of the pie. So this is how we would graphically represent 2.5. Finally, let's work our way back from percentages into decimal and into fraction format. And once again, to do that, you just reference the percentages from column H. So we'll go equals this cell, in this case is H28, hit enter, and we get our decimal because this particular column has already been pre-formatted for decimals. But let's say it was accidentally formatted as a currency, in this case 75 cents, but we don't want currency values in this example, we just want regular numbers. So we head back up to the number formatting pull-down menu and click on number, and we can adjust the number of digits to the right of decimal point once again by clicking on these light blue arrow icons at the top. Similarly for the fraction, we just reference the cell. Either of these 2 cells will work, and we just hit enter, and once again we head on up to the number formatting pull-down menu and click on fraction, and lo and behold, it's automatically created a fraction for us. Okay, that's fine and dandy, but let's say you didn't have access to Excel or a spreadsheet program like Google Sheets, and you needed to create a decimal from a percentage or create a fraction from a percentage. First, let's convert a percentage into a decimal. So let's review our helpful hints here, converting percentages to decimals. Remember that the percentage symbol simply means divide me by 100. So using that very fact, we can easily create a fraction from any of these percentages by simply taking the number in front of the decimal and dividing it by 100. In the case of 10%, we could write it as 10 divided by 100. That is the same thing as 10%. 10 divide me by 100 is 10 over 100. And remember, once again, that once you have a fraction, in this case 10 over 100, which can be reduced to 1/10 by dividing the top and the bottom by 10, but in this case, all we're asking for is to create a fraction from a percentage. And remember that if you want to convert that fraction into a decimal, you simply divide a over b, 10 divided by 100. If I key that in again, remember, 10 divided by 100, we get 0.1, which is the decimal. And we could have used our handheld calculator to do that as well. But let's take a look at 87.5% for a second, shall we? In this example, to create the fraction, we can simply go 87.5 divide me by 100. So that would look something like this. 87.5 divide me by 100. And that looks a little funky because in mathematics, it's not considered good diction or syntax to have a decimal as your numerator. In fraction land, we're always working with whole numbers, not fractions or decimals in the numerator. Always. And the denominator happens to be a whole number as well in the case of fractions. So to correct this problem, all we have to do is multiply the numerator and the denominator by 10. And this will remove the decimal 0.5. But remember, whatever you do to the numerator, you have to do to the denominator as well in order to preserve the valuation of the fraction. So we multiplied the 87.5 by 10. Now we have to multiply the 100 by 10 as well. 10 over 10 is simply 1. If you remember, a over a is simply the number 1. We are simply multiplying a fraction by the number 1, which preserves identity of value. So multiplying the top, once again, 87.5 by 10 gives us 875. If we multiply the denominator as well by 10, we get 100 times 10 is 1,000. So our proper fraction becomes 875 divided by 1,000. Okay? Not 87.5 over 100. No can do. 875 or 1,000 is actually a correct form of diction in fraction land. Okay, and then once again, to create the decimal from the fraction, that's easy. We can just use a calculator if we wanted to do that, but it's simply 875 divided by 1,000. And remember, to get the decimal from the fraction, you just divide the numerator by the denominator, equals 875 divided by 1,000, 0.875. Now, in the case of 33.3% and 66.6%, these are rather special cases because we're dealing with infinite number series. You should try to memorize certain percentages in their fraction formats. 33.3% is the same thing as 1/3. So to type it out in fraction format, it's equals 1 divided by 3. And that gives me a decimal of 0.3333, never ending. But since I'm limited to 3 digits in this case, it's 0.333, 333 thousandths. This is obviously not a fraction format, so we have to head back up here to the number formatting pull-down menu, and we'll select fraction, and we get 1/3. The same thing for 66.6%. We could just simply reference that cell and head back over to the pull-down menu and get a fraction, 2/3. So you should memorize that 1/3 is equal to 33.3%, which is the same thing as 0.33333, never ending or repeating. And 2/3 is 0.666, which is the same thing as 66.6%. Now, certainly all the valuations that I've listed here in this table, you should memorize. Some of them will come more naturally to you than others. For example, I remember going into the deli counter and ordering some cold cuts, and I asked the person behind the counter who was slicing the cold cuts, I said, give me 5/8 of a pound of the bologna, for example. And the person behind the counter was like, I don't know what 5/8 is. And I remember going to another deli counter once and asking a person for 7/8 of a pound of, roast beef or something. And that person also told me I'm not familiar with what 7/8 is. Just keep in mind that all these fractions can be converted into decimals. So if you wanted to help out the person behind the deli counter with 7/8, you just type in your calculator 7 divided by 8, and you could say, oh, that's 0.875 pounds. And that'll help the person with the digital scales behind the counter there to realize that it's, 7/8 of a pound is just 0.875 pounds. And similarly, 5/8 of a pound, 5 divided by 8, is simply 0.625. So you could just tell the person behind the counter, oh, that's simply 0.625 pounds. I think that all of these are pretty important to know. Everything here, 1/2, you should know that's immediately. You should know that that's 0.5 or 50%. 1/3, you should immediately know that's 0.3333 repeating or 33.3333%. 1/4, 0.25, 25%. Half off, 50%, 1/3 off. That's 1/3 or 0.3333. 75% is simply 3/4 or 0.75. And certainly the number 1, you should memorize that as certainly as being 100% of a pie of pizza. So we'll just copy Excel's formula here and we'll click on the percent icon. There you have it. And similarly, 3.0 is the same thing as 300%. 10 is the same thing as 1,000%. And there you have it, fractions to decimals to percentages to decimals to fractions, as well as their respective pizza pie charts. These are essential fractions, again, that you should know as a consumer in personal finance. I hope you enjoyed this video lesson as part of the EdAdvance Consumer Math Personal Finance course. Thanks so much for watching. If you happen to have any questions about any of these steps that we talked about, please bring them into class or write your comments below the video. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.